Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our diversity presentation this week. And we start always with remembering all of those who've gone before us and cleared our path. But we especially acknowledge the Duwamish, upon whose land we stand. And so tonight it's my pleasure to introduce you to our member, Joan Singler, and Joan has been one of the ones that gets the most wonderful programs, and tonight she's over the mark. So Joan, please come introduce your guest.
Thank you for being here. Good evening, everyone. Before I turn the podium, can you hear me? Is this on? Before I turn the podium over to our speaker, Dana Frank, I want to take just a couple minutes to introduce the rest of her family that is here with us tonight. And I want to point out that this event is sponsored by the Diversity Awareness Committee. Diversity, which is the goal of this committee, has now become a concept or a goal that, according to the President of the United States, should be erased. We have 3 women who can attest to what it takes to survive in what is still a segregated world. Dana's mother and business partner, Theresa, is with us tonight. Sitting next to Theresa is Dana's sister, Tracy Meyer. Perhaps at some future time, we can invite Tracy back to share her battle as a Black woman and mother with the medical profession, trying to save the life of her newborn son. Tracy tells this amazing story in an inspiring memoir called Incompatible with Nature. Her book will be in the library, and I urge you all to try to read it. Part of my extended family and next-door neighbors, for more than 60 years, I was well aware of the challenges that this Black family has faced, including police harassment. So keep that in mind as Dana tells us her story, how the family managed to get up, get on it, and become Black entrepreneurs with lessons on creating a legacy and wealth. Part of Dana's legacy has been her devotion and supporting with fundraising for social service agencies that have addressed the needs of young children. A few years ago, the Seattle Times, in the Home of the Week section, recognized Dana and Theresa for their work in assisting low-income families in finding housing. Dana has lived in the Central District all of her life. She has raised her children there. And now the future generation has arrived, and Dana just recently became the proud grandmother of a beautiful boy. So Dana, the podium is yours.
Thank you, everybody. What Joan neglected to say is that she is my other mother. I had 2 mothers, so I'm very, very blessed. It is International Women's Month, and I just had the most wonderful dinner and speaking with and hearing stories from Sally and Bernice, and of course I know my Mama Jones and my mother's story and my sister's story coming from Germany. So I'd like to start with a poem. We're going to have some poems and stories tonight, but I want to start with a poem I wrote called Having It All, because when I listen to these women's stories, it represents everything that Women's History Month means. So, how does she find the energy, seamlessly weaving all on her plate with synergy? Business, family, friends, workout, travel, giving. Slow down, they say, but she's too busy living. Time is fleeting, but she says yes to another meeting because she knows one platform begets another. It's wisdom learned from her father and mother. Let me remember the poem. She never looks back on a day without a smile because she's made damn sure it was worthwhile. Confident, accomplished, and always standing tall. Don't give her a portion. She's having it all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to do a little different than I usually do with my storytelling, and I'm going to start off with a chapter from my book, Get Up and Get On It, A Black Entrepreneur's Lessons on Creating Legacy and Wealth. And I'm going to read about my other mother, Joan. And I was really fortunate to have this dynamic woman that truly taught me about having it all. And in 1964, when I was born, shortly thereafter, in August, the Singlers moved next door to us. So they were my vast family and only friends that I had growing up. And this is the story. 1 second here. Okay. Let's see. Aside from my parents, the most impactful people in my upbringing were my surrogate mom and dad and best friend's parents, Ed and Joan. Joan, a white civil rights activist from Detroit, was one of the authors of Seattle in Black and White. She and Ed were also founding members of Seattle CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. By the 1960s, our Central District had morphed into the heart of the civil rights movement in Seattle. Their campaigns fought employment and police discrimination, school segregation, and unequal housing opportunities. When I think of the Singlers, who at this time of writing are in their 90s, I credit them with teaching me that we all must be a part of changing the narratives for those left out of the script. In addition to their civil rights activism, Joan and Ed exposed me to compassion, adventure, and concern for our environment. They took me camping, skiing, and on weekends, Joan would have all the kids grab a garbage bag and do neighborhood trash cleanups for exchange for a popsicle. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to this family for their insights into racial inequality and the fact that it's not just a black person's fight. Joan and Ed would champion grocery store strikes when they wouldn't employ black people. They held picket signs and fought systems that were unfair and unjust. So thank you, Joan. So tonight, I'm going to talk about being told no. And too many of us are told no, not based on our talent, our ability, or our potential. We're told no based on our color, our religion, our age, disabilities we might have, the pronouns we choose to go by, or perhaps our family's social or economic status. I call individuals that understand that they don't have to accept no or the labels that society has placed upon them fire starters. So if you'll bear with me for one more poem, I've memorized this one. This is called Fire Starters, and I invite you to think of the fire starters in your own family. Who was the first person to pick up the baton and start the relay for change and say, I'm not going to accept no? Here's the poem. A fire starter is born with passion, drive, and vision. They don't accept the narrative at birth which they were given. The life of living paycheck to paycheck and barely getting by. waiting to collect Social Security when their time comes to die. Fire starters aren't born with a silver spoon or a trust fund, but they refuse to be invisible and have their dreams shunned. They amplify injustice, speak out and protest the unfair, so that the marginalized and those left out of the script will also get their share. Fire starters know better than to settle for less and follow the masses. I witness this tenacity, grit, and grind from behind my father's glasses. My mama's DNA is a gumbo of beauty and class. They are wise, determined, and strong. My parents have been my best teachers, who've given me lessons I was blessed to receive, and now so very blessed to pass along. Success only comes before work in the dictionary, and if you don't try, you have no one else to blame. At the end of your journey, ask yourself, what will be your legacy, and how bright will be your flame? Thank you. Thank you. It's 1950, and my father, Gerald Frank, comes of age in his hometown of Detroit, Michigan. His options are limited because it's a time of segregation and Jim Crow laws. Now, even though history books have taught us that Jim Crow laws meant separate but equal, Daddy knew there was nothing equal about the color of his skin dictating where he could eat, where he could work, where he could live, and where he could thrive. My grandfather, his name was Houston, and like his name, Houston was a sweet, soft-spoken man from the South. And he warned my father. He said, son, you're hard-headed. You need to stay in your lane. There's less traffic. Why don't you get one of those good jobs at Chrysler or Ford? Did you hear they're hiring? Daddy looked on at his friends and his peers, and they were getting up before day, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, putting in a double shift on the assembly line, and coming home at the end of 2 weeks with barely enough of a paycheck to put a decent meal on the table. That was not the future my fire starter father envisioned. He was a budding drummer, so he packed his van with his dreams and his drums, and he drove as far away from Black Bottom, Detroit, an area where they were segregated and forced to live. And he came to the Pacific Northwest. And even though he needed this green book, the Negro's Traveler's Guide, to tell him where his green dollars would allow him to rest safely at night, he made it here. And when he got to this Pacific Northwest, this beautiful landscape that we are all so fortunate to call home, and he saw Mount Rainier and the Olympics and Puget Sound and Lake Washington, he said, they're not building any more water. I got to get busy. And he did. He enrolled in classes at the University of Washington, and on nights he lied about his age, and he went to work in Seattle's vibrant jazz nightclubs. My father was later listed as one of Seattle's best drummers, and he played with everyone from Dizzy Gillespie to Duke Ellington. But in 1950, he's an 18-year-old kid, and he was just starting out playing in the clubs. And on days when money was tight and work was tighter, he created his own work. And he'd take that van and he'd put a sign in it that said available for hire. And he'd go downtown and he'd wash windows on department stores and office buildings. And even though he hadn't been hired, once the work was done, management often felt obligated to pay. One night on a break from the bandstand, Daddy got to talking to this regular patron. And the guy explained that he had a home for sale not too far from the University of Washington, where, again, my father was attending classes. The address, I'll never forget, it's 2527 East Helen Street, right on that steep hill coming out of the Arboretum. Daddy went back on the bandstand, and during the next break, he sat down, he looked at the man, he goes, I want to buy your house. The man started laughing. He goes, no, you're a black kid. You have no money. What are you talking about? And Daddy leaned in, and he goes, I may be black, I may be broke, but I'm not broken. And they struck a deal. My father worked off the down payment. He did whatever it took to come up with the down payment. He became the man's chauffeur. He mowed his lawn. He taught his son how to play drums. And after he worked off the down payment in 1950, in order to make the $48 monthly note, he subdivided the rooms in this house and rented them out to his fellow students at the University of Washington. Now, this was long before Airbnb was even a concept, but fire starters are visionaries. It's 1954. My father's once again playing drums, this time at the local Elks, and it's a beauty contest called Miss Bronze. And when this fine woman hit the stage in her one-piece white swimsuit and gold high heels, she eliminated the competition, won the Miss Bronze prize money, and my parents became partners because fire starters recognize fire starters. In 1943, my grandmother, which was a lifelong domestic, and my grandfather, a carpenter, left their home in Chicago with, at the time, their 5 kids, and they came to Bremerton, Washington, because my grandfather had found work in the shipyards. And the only way I could describe it is my mother had known from an early age, because they ended up having 8 children, that she had to help support her family of birth. So she had worked taking care of other people's children, as an elevator operator, a nurse's aide, a department store window dresser, and she brought that hard work ethic together with my father. And together they did an amazing feat. For 19 years, every year, they purchased a property, an apartment building in the Central District, without any bank funding due to redlining, a practice of banks not giving funding in the Central and Black communities. So my childhood was different than most. My sister and I grew up putting pickets on banks. And today I stand before you as the proud steward of a now 3rd-generation family business that beat the odds. And people say, how did you beat the odds? They say only 12% of family businesses make it to the 3rd generation. And although I have an acronym that I teach when I'm talking to college students in the younger generation, I call it REAL. The R is research. The foundation of any successful endeavor is doing your research. The E, expanding your network. My network is my net worth. When my parents were not able to get funding back in the 50s, they expanded their network and they found bankable partners that were able to get loans. My parents would work off the down payments, refinance, and buy their partners out. The A is what we're here talking about tonight, is amplifying injustice and the diversity that it matters. So often people look at me and say, oh, it's so unfortunate that you had to picket. But that was way back then. You know, that happened back in the 60s and the 70s. And I share these stories. In my book, there's a story about a NFL great named Jimmy Kennedy. And Jimmy Kennedy played in the NFL for 9 years, and he amassed $14 million. And Jimmy decided he didn't want the acronym I call NFL, not for long, with his money. He wanted to invest it. So he went to the bank, Chase Bank, and he said, I want private client status. Now, this is status that they give people that make $250,000. And Jimmy showed up, all 6'5", 300-pound black man that he is, and he kept getting pushback. And this was just 4 years ago, he kept on being told, you know, the brush off. So Jimmy excused himself and discreetly put his phone on record, went to the restroom, and when he came back and retrieved his phone and got in his car, the conversation went like this: get rid of him. You know, we don't bank with people that look like him. You know how those black ball players are? In a year from now, the money will be gone. He'll have a couple of fancy watches and a couple of fancy cars. It's a waste of our time. Jimmy's story hit the front page of the New York Times. Chase Bank's president said, we must do better. And that's when they committed to making a $30 billion commitment to bridge the racial financial wealth gap. So the amplifying injustice, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And especially during these times that Mama Joan just talked about, it's so important that we amplify injustice. Another similar story happened last June. This beautiful, brilliant black doctor, she's a neuroscientist. Her name was Dr. Raven Baxter. She found her dream home. It was in Myrtle Beach, and she always dreamed of being on the water. She didn't want to lose out on the house, so she made a full price offer, long distance. When she made the trip to visit her home that she had purchased, the 82-year-old white homeowner looked at her and was like, oh my God, I didn't realize Dr. Raven Baxter was black. I can't have a black woman in my home. Dr. Baxter took her complaint to her 168,000 social media platform. and they settled. So we didn't have TikTok, Facebook. We didn't have all of the social media platforms that are available today. But I say the importance of amplifying injustice. And the L, so we've done research, expand your network, amplify injustice, and the L is leverage. Leverage the banks. Right now, there's a program that came out last June, and it's called the Covenant Homeownership Act. And I tell all of my BIPOC friends, if you have roots in Seattle from 1968 and you're of color, you can get down payment assistance and 0% interest. These are the answers to all of the things that my mother Joan and my mother Theresa fought for. So we have to continue to amplify and make sure that those programs are known about. You know, also when people ask me, you know, how we beat the odds and have been in business this many years, I say it's because I came from a family of fire starters. My family didn't just break barriers, they shattered them. My grandmother that I talked about that was a lifelong domestic, and my grandfather that was a carpenter, of their 8 children, my aunt was the first African-American flight attendant that Alaska Airlines hired and retired. My uncle, Judge Jones, federal judge here, he's handled some of our most notorious cases, including the Green River murder. My mom, at 92 years old, still gets up and gets on it with me every day, and that's why my book is called Get Up and Get On It. But most famously is my late Uncle Quincy Jones. And Uncle Quincy said something, and when he passed, he left us with so much more than just his volume of incredible music. He left us with this quote. He said, "Not 1 ounce of my self-worth is dependent on your acceptance of me." And if we could all just live like that every day and not accept no, I say, become a fire starter, and when you light that flame, make it so bright that you leave a trail for generations to follow. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions. Mama Joan.
Dana has to tell you a few stories about her father being able to pull out some tricks. Come on, Dana.
All right. I thought I was going to get off easy here. And I'm also donating another book for the library, so if anybody wants to read it. Poor Joan had to be neighbors with my father. It was, Daddy was a very, very interesting character. You know, I mean, they say you can take the boy out of the city, you can't take the city out of the boy, and he came from Detroit, and he came up hard knocks. And so I'll start with this. Oh, no, I'll tell a story. I got a story for you. I know that. I know. I'll get there. Okay. All right. Okay. Here's a great daddy story. So it's 1981. I'm 16 years old, and I'm not a fire starter. I am the recipient of my parents changing the narrative. Our family home right next to Joan sat at the foot of the dead end overlooking Lake Washington. We had an electric gate. There's an in-ground swimming pool. Mount Rainier looks like an ice cream cone melting in Lake Washington. Daddy has built 2 detached apartments for my 2 older sisters. These are luxury apartments. They've got hardwood floors and fully equipped with kitchens and chandeliers hanging over bathtubs. And I'm only 16, so I still live in the main house with my parents. They still need to keep an eye on me. I still live with my mama. But at that time, my bedroom was just a few feet from the family in-home office. And Daddy's desk would sit behind this floor-to-ceiling window. And each day he'd look out on the courtyard, and it was a constant stream of traffic. In the 1980s, the Central District was 90% African-American. And people would come. There were tenants. There were contractors. There were people just coming to seek my father's knowledge, to see how he had changed the narrative. And Daddy also loved to collect cars, and we had a car for every occasion. He never went to work on the assembly line, but he had a Silver Shadow Rolls Royce, a 1969 Mercedes that was so shiny I could see my reflection just by standing in front of it. But my chosen ride of the fleet is a vintage white 1965 Mustang convertible with a hood scoop. I called her Sally. And I love that car, but I soon realized that it was a blessing and a curse having my driver's license, because my 2 older sisters were happy that I was the youngest to get my driver's license. I was the youngest to work in the family business. So each morning I'd wake up and Tracy'd say, "Hey, Dana, I need you to run up and show that apartment on 19th. And then my middle sister would say, "And you forgot to do the move-in checklist on 22nd, so stop by and do that when you leave there." And just as I'd be heading out for my chores, Daddy would yell out and say, "Hey, sugar, one more thing. I need you to run out to Parker Paint and Ballard, get 5 gallons of Oyster White, make sure it's semi-gloss, and then drop it off in the Mint at 27th and Cherry. And if they're running behind, step in and give them a hand because that inspection's on Tuesday and I need it to pass." So one Friday, I'd had enough. And I just, I'd done my work for the week. I'd even gone around with the exterminator to make sure there were no pests in the units. And it was Seafair. I awoke, the sun was shining. I could already hear the Blue Angels and I was thrilled to pack Mustang Sally and get down to Seward Park and see who was going to win the hydroplanes as they practiced for Sunday's big race. So my father shows up at my door. He knocks. He doesn't wait for me to say, "Come in." He just sticks his head in the door and says, "Hey, now time to get up and get on it." So I follow him to the office. He's sitting behind his desk, and he's staring out his big picture window, looking on his courtyard. And I'm like, "Daddy, get up and get on what? It's Seafair. I'm not working today. I've done everything that you've asked all week. This is my day. I'm going to the beach." And he just keeps his focus right outside. And he shakes his head, and he says, "Not today, sugar. What we have to do is way more important than any parade." "What could be more important than a parade, Daddy? I'm going to the parade. This has been planned. I'm not." And I'm looking and I see what I call his methadone maintenance crew. They're all assembling, getting ready to work for the day. And he still won't give me any contact. He's just like, "No, you're not going to any parade today." And that's when I spot it. I see the wooden sticks and the white poster board. And I look at my father and I say, "Who's pissed you off now?" And I look outside again, and then I see Mr. Jenkins, and I go, "Daddy, isn't that Mr. Jenkins from 22nd? He called yesterday screaming that his front door was missing. You said, 'Your front door is missing. Ain't that a coincidence? So is your rent.'" "Daddy, what is Mr. Jenkins doing here? Why are we making picket signs today?" Finally, he looks up at me and he smiles and he goes, "Oh, baby, it's the bank. Once again, they cut our funding. I got it all planned perfectly. You're good with signs. Get out there, get those signs made, and at noon, I got a meeting inside with the bank. I want you down there with this crew carrying those signs." At noon, I find myself hot, humiliated, and heated, carrying the signs that I'd painstakingly made all morning in front of 4th and Pike, downtown Seattle. "Unfair beware. Bank rips off black man. Down with redlining. Down with racism." Traffic is coming to a near halt to see my signs. And just when I thought the day couldn't get any worse, my name is called. I look back at Freddie and Mr. Jenkins, and they're all carrying the signs. Thank God it's my friends. And they say, "What's going on?" We didn't have cell phones then. And they said, "We've been calling your house all morning looking for you. Your mom told us where to find you." So I look back. I know the guys can handle it. And I made a choice. I went with my friends and we headed down to Seward Park. I had a glorious afternoon. Mrs. Budweiser won. And so I come home. It's dusk. It's about 5 o'clock. I come rolling into the house. And Daddy's sitting behind his desk. And at the time, this hit song had just come out by Queen. "Another one bites the dust." So I'm coming in and I'm feeling no pain. My father's sitting at the desk and he looks at me and he goes, "What the hell happened to you?" "Another one bites the dust." "You know, Dad, I'm done. I quit. I've had enough. No more of that picketing, going to Parker Paint. You got it? Going around with the exterminator. No. If you want me to help in the office, I'm happy to help out. Do some filing. Occasionally I'll show an apartment, but not doing no more of that go for errand stuff." My retirement lasted about a week. I became a tourist in our city. I went from Mount Rainier to Public Market. I enjoyed myself, and soon I got bored, so I retreated to watching soap operas. And my favorite soap was All My Children. And I was obsessed with this character, Erica Kane. But every day, as I was just about to find out what Erica and this new character, Tad, were doing, a commercial would come on. And it was Brooke Shields, and she was modeling these jeans. And she stood there, and she just looked so fabulous. And she'd say, "What comes between me and my Calvins?" Nothing. That was my clue to get up, get in Mustang Sally, head down to Nordstrom, because I was going to get those jeans. They did not disappoint. I come home, I look at my father, and I say, "You like my jeans?" Guess what? Nothing's coming between me and my Calvins. Daddy looks at me. He says, "How many times have I told you, just because it's on your ass doesn't make it an asset?" He says, "But have a seat. I got a little something for you to go along with those jeans that nothing's coming between." I immediately melt. I mean, my father was so handsome. He had this mustache and these pearly white teeth. And I'm just like, immediately, I'm like, "Daddy, we're cool. I didn't expect you to go buy me anything. I mean, I taught you that there's no such thing as a well-adjusted slave, but, it's all good. You didn't have to buy me anything." And secretly, I'm praying that he's gone down to Nordstrom. He's actually got really good taste and got me a nice blouse to go along with these jeans that I'm wearing. He says, "No, baby, you were right. I took away your choice. And I didn't have a right to do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, you kind of did." And then he hands me this beautifully wrapped package, and I'm trembling as I'm opening it. "Daddy, is this some sort of joke? That's a McDonald's uniform. You are so funny." No, baby. You're missing the story. You're missing the point. After you walked off of the picket line, I had to take the men for lunch. So we went over there to McDonald's. The one on McClellan? Baby, this story gets so good. Timmy, the man that lives at 165 17th. Yeah, you know Timmy. I explained to him our predicament. You not wanting to picket, you not wanting to work. Timmy said, "Let her come work for me. She can sell beautiful burgers or beautiful housing." Daddy, this is not funny any longer. No. You don't understand. I'm not mad at McDonald's. They sell more burgers than anyone on the planet. And the better news is that he's got a technique. He's going to teach you how to make those fries golden and just right, and you're not going to get burned too bad. And once you get the fries down, you get a parking space. But in the meantime, trade me the keys to Mustang Sally for this here bus pass. That's the day I became a fire starter. So, as my father went on to explain to me about choices, that he didn't have a choice in 1950 when he left Detroit, and his options were limited. And the story that my other mother, Joan, so much wants me to share is Daddy had a process that he called the reverse, and he would always push everything to the envelope. So we bought a property out in Queen Anne. It was on Dexter Avenue North. Everyone in the neighborhood had mother-in-law apartments, which were technically illegal. I mean, our family was constantly in trouble for trying to make the mortgage by creating illegal units. But everyone in the neighborhood had one. And then the neighbors got very upset because we took this beautiful duplex overlooking Lake Union, and we moved in 2 black families downstairs that were on Section 8. Well, the white neighbors got very upset. They said, "Get rid of those black neighbors. We don't want them here. They're bringing down our values. Get them out now." They were going to the Department of Construction and Land Use, turning us in, and it was just a big mess. My sister had to sit up all night and write a variance trying to get it overturned. So Daddy comes up with an idea, and we had this young white carpenter. His name was Chris, and Chris was amazing. And he was extremely skilled. He was an alcoholic, but extremely skilled. And on most morning, the only water that touched him was his coffee. So Chris shows up, and Daddy leans in, and he says, "Chris," he says, "son, I got something I need you to do really late tonight." And Chris is like, "Okay, boss, what's up?" He had a long ponytail and, swung around his back. He goes, "Okay, boss, what's up?" He goes, I need you to lean in and listen to me because you can't let anybody see what you're going to do tonight. You have to be real discreet. That night, Chris went out to this duplex on Dexter Avenue North and spray painted in the biggest letters he could on the white garage, "Blacks Get Out." The next day, the neighbors saw this, and this is where my father would call it the reverse reverse. They were so horrified that they were living amongst racists and bigots that they went down to the Department of Construction and Land Use and fought on our behalf to get the variance approved, and we did. So Mama loves that story. So thank you so much. This has just been fun sharing stories with you, and we're crazy, but we're still here.
So we have some mic runners, and if anyone has a question for Dana, raise your hand and she'll be happy to answer it.
I have a question.
Yes.
How in the actual hell did you get the nerve to sit up here and do this?
I'm your sister, remember?
Could you all hear? Oh, sorry. I asked my sister how in the actual hell she had the nerve to get up here and do this.
Anybody else? Thank you, Annie. Oh, we're crazy. I mean, you know, it's in my DNA. Thank you. Yes, Joan.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
What inspired you to write the book?
Thank you. Great question. You know, it's really the answer's really changed over the years. I started working on the book 28 years ago when my father passed away, because I really just wanted to make it as a gift for my children to know who this legacy came from. And then my children were like, you know, we really want you to share this. And lately I've been going around lecturing at universities. I was at Towson University, Essex Community College, MTSU, American University. And as I'm connecting with these young kids, you know, the lessons that were instilled in me, I'm finding it so rewarding to be able to share things like cash erodes and equity grows. And just because it's on your ass doesn't make it an asset. You know, and just instilling that these kids should understand. I mean, I think that we have such a generation of the next generation that is so tied up with their cell phones and games, and, you know, they're just not learning. When I'm showing apartments, people come to me and these kids' credits are ruined and they're 20 years old. And so it's just, you know, really trying to go back and give them the basic lessons. Yeah. So thank you. Joan's asking for me to talk about what I've done to reach out to the community. So I was a board member of the Museum of Popular Culture for 9 years. I just rolled off of that. When we talked about expanding your network, I've been involved with Treehouse for foster kids for 25 years. I hold an annual holiday drive for foster kids. I have all my friends come, bring presents for foster kids, and, you know, we just celebrate, and it's been a wonderful way to connect. I was on Mary's Place No Child Should Sleep Outside campaign. And, you know, I just really feel that, you know, there's a moment in every child's life when the door opens and lets the future in. So if I can be a part of that, that's what I want to do. And children are my passion because they didn't ask to come here. Yeah, I teach tennis at the Nativity School to kids. And, you know, you never know, that racket you put in their hand, it might be the next Venus or Serena. So it's been great.
It sounds like you're still in real estate, as your family was. Has it changed, or are you still running into the racism that was so common earlier?
Great question. Absolutely. So right now, the next generation, my son who's 31 and my daughter who's 23 have taken over the business. And yeah, I mean, that story I gave with Jimmy Kennedy, $14 million, and he couldn't get private client status. You know, it's really, really tough. And it's frustrating because my husband is a white CEO, and every year I go with him to the Chase Bank CEO conference. And every year Mom says, "Did you see any blacks?" And I said, "When I look in the mirror." So, you know, there really does need to be something. The statistic right now is that 74% of white Americans own homes compared to 44% of black homes. And that's why we need to do something to bridge that gap. And, you know, the disparity in financing is real. A great book was written by a woman named Emily Flitter, and she also covered the Jimmy Kennedy story. And that came out 2 years ago, and it's called White Wall. And it talks about, you know, the discrimination in banking that still happens. Yeah, my mother and I, as, you know, two black females, we've had a real challenging time getting loans, and yeah, it continues to be a hassle.
Have you ever thought of opening a bank yourself?
No.
Well, I had a friend who couldn't get loans because older women weren't able to get loans, so she opened a bank and gave loans to people who were older. So why don't you open a bank and give loans to black people who want to buy homes?
That's a great idea. But in the meantime, I'll just tell them about covenant home ownership programs and everything else. I mean, you get to the point where it's just like you spread yourself so thin like butter. People often ask, you know, why don't I get involved in politics? Like during COVID, it was really challenging for housing providers because we had to operate with our hands cuffed. And people would move in and they knew they didn't have to pay. And so, you know, you were my mortgage, utilities, taxes, maintenance, everything was still going on. You know, but I had, you know, and you only have so much attention that you can direct. So it's challenging.
You also started a group, Black, I can't remember what it is, but.
So August 26th, which is my birthday, I created National Black Family and Business Day. And it's just an annual day to celebrate the accomplishments of black families in business. And, you know, I run through that statistic that only 12% make it to the third generation, but it's still so amazing to me that my now kids, I just had my first grandbabies, 5.5 months old, you know, are living off of what my parents started in 1950. And it's just, that's been our entire way that we've supported ourselves. I mean, there's been no other means. So I think it's really important to highlight business. Yes.
As you look at your audience here tonight, very white community that would very much like to be more diverse, what suggestions do you have?
You know, I attended early on a meeting that Joan had me come to, and talking about, you know, reaching out to to get more of a diverse community. The issue, of course, here is that Seattle has a very small black community, or people of color community. I mean, the numbers are very small. And I think that the best thing to do is just to continue to invite people to come and see. You know, let them come and check it out, and just, you know, get out there. We went through a bunch of different groups like the Boule and the Black Judges Association and the Esquire Club, and, you know, the Links and the Sisters and the Friendships groups. Again, they're very concentrated and very small, but that's all we can do is just really let them come and visit and see. Yeah.
I have a question. How do you feel about the transformation of the Central District? It's been a very strange sort of thing. We have, on the one hand, very dynamic black groups, and on the other hand, lots of rich white people. How do you feel about it?
You know, being born and raised, I live within 2 blocks. And so basically for 60 years, I've lived on those 2 blocks. And so I've seen it all. I've seen the changes. I mean, we've gone through, when our families were living there, it was such a melting pot. I mean, we were so fortunate. We had Mrs. Date, an Asian lady, and we had Mrs. Winsberg, who would give us story hour, German lady, and we had Annie Gerber, who taught us the arts and took us to Bumbershoot, and then we had our black families, and it was just such a melting pot of color and culture. And now, I mean, we went from my mom and I renting during our family years of growing up. Our residents were 99% black to now 99% white. So it's a big change.
Yeah.
And, I've been involved in like legacy homeowner acts. You'll see if you come through the Central District, there's a lot of signs that say legacy home, letting people know not to be a pirate and come and try to steal from the elder black families that are there. And, just trying to educate these kids. Financial literacy is so important, and trying to educate these kids because, grandma passes away and the house is gone and it's sold for pennies on the dollar.
So what about Wanawari as a model?
Who?
Do you know about Wanawari on 24th
Yes,
Street?
I do. Yeah.
That's one model.
Yep. Another one is, my son is a leasing agent, and he worked on the 23rd and Union project.
Yeah, that's huge.
And Africa Town is right next door there. So,
Yeah.
they're trying.
Wanawari, in case you don't know, is a... Oh, well, I'll let her explain it then.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's a very, very interesting project because the man that's... What's his name again?
Amari.
Omari, yes. He grew up in this on this street in this house, and he has managed to save it from being taken away. First of all, renting it, and then they've just bought this house. It's a major cultural center on 24th Avenue, and they sponsor art exhibitions and lectures and workshops and all sorts of things. And I think it's a really interesting model. I wonder how many people could do something like that.
Yeah.
Are there any businesses here in Seattle, like Chase, that you wish we would let know how important it is to us that there isn't a bad habit going on?
Yeah, many of the banks have been trying to instill these programs, to address the gap. Bank of America, I mean, most of the banks really are trying, and I know I beat up on Chase just because that was the example. But yeah, all of the banks are really trying to, make, some sort of conciliation. They do have programs. If you look on their website, like I said, the $30 billion commitment, and then, they show you where the breakout is on the different programs that they're funding. Yeah. But there's a long way to go.
Some of us about 14, and not all from Horizon House, but mostly, go down on the corner, and we have been since George Floyd. What we can do. We may be old, but we can go hold a sign, and we still. So Black Lives Matter was started here, and a few years ago, and we still go down, and we've added Save Our Democracy, but. What, as a black woman, do you feel that adds or helps in any way? I just like your point of view. We've been there, rain or shine. We don't go if there's ice.
Sally, as I said, a closed mouth doesn't get fed, and I think it's so important. My mother, Joan here, was so instrumental in showing us that it's not just a black problem. I mean, when you would teach me about going to grocery stores that wouldn't hire black checkout clerks, and you go through the store and find each little bitty thing that you could fill the basket with, and then when you get to checkout, say you don't take black employees, we don't want it, and then make them restock. I mean, we have to push back. And I think it's so important because what's the saying? Silence is acceptance. Yeah, you got it. Indeed.
Okay. I just wanted to say
There's
one more.
there's one back there too.
Over there, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the declining black population in Seattle? I've heard that before, and I know for a lot of people it's a real issue.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's the displacement, it's gentrification, you know, and what's happening is that the housing prices have increased so much that they've displaced them and moved them further south. And I mean, you know, when we were growing up, we had Yesler Terrace. Now those are apartments that rent for $5,000 a month. You know, we had Holly Park. You know, everything is just being pushed further south, and you know, it's really unfortunate. Yeah.
I think the elephant in the living room here is what's going on in Washington with respect to diversity. Oh, I'm sorry. Is what's going on in Washington with respect to diversity. Do you see yourself being affected by that?
I think we all will be affected by it. Yeah, I really do.
I just want to point out one thing about Dana's book. Preceding each chapter is a poem, and Dana has written every one of those poems, and some of them are pretty inspiring. So besides just reading about her dad or her family or how they've managed in this community to end up not being on welfare, I urge you to at least, there's several copies in the library. Pick up the book if you like to read poetry and read Dana's poems.
Thank you, Mom.
Dana, you are such an asset to our world and to the world.
Thank you, Sally, so
We
much.
thank you so much for this beautiful evening. And I would like to close with a statement by Martin Luther King. And he said, "The aftermath of violence is bitterness. The aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of the beloved community. So that the battle is over, a new relationship comes into being. The end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. This is the love that may well be the salvation of the civilization." And I want to say to each of you my appreciation, and for all of those before us that created Horizon House as a beloved community. And we have a responsibility to make sure that that goes forward for the future. And thank you for your inspiration, for who you are and who you are becoming. You're a delight and such a treat to have you here. Thank you.